Let's go to the brief news from the world over this week. The Iraqi offensive to retake the Anbar province from ISIS is underway. The operation comes a little more than a week after the Iraqi military suffered a humiliating defeat after withdrawing from the capital of Ramadi. On Wednesday, Iraq claimed it had captured some 200 ISIS fighters, while 3 suicide bombers killed at least 30 Iraqi soldiers. According to the U.S. Defense Department, ISIS is still in control of Ramadi. And the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is reporting that ISIS had publicly executed at least 20 men at Palmyra's 2,000-year-old Roman-era amphitheater. The militants gathered citizens to witness the executions after the ancient city was sacked last week. Separately, the watchdog group says ISIS is still holding 210 Assyrian Christian hostages. Meanwhile, another missionary priest has been kidnapped. Father Jacques Morad, a monk and prior of a monastery near Homs, was seized by 2 armed men. Father Morad is part of the same monastic community as Father Paolo Dall'Olio, who was kidnapped in 2013. He is still missing. Ireland became the first nation to legalize gay marriage by popular vote this past Saturday. In a country where over 75% of the population identifies as Catholic, the referendum passed by a margin of 62 to 32%. Dublin Archbishop Diarmuid Martin said the vote shows that the Catholic Church needs to improve its outreach and catechesis.
I believe the Church has to carry out a reality check about its relationship with young people particularly. One of the biggest challenges is the fact that such a large number of young people who grow up, who've gone to Catholic schools, who grow up in the environment in Ireland, we're actually drifting away from the Church.
This week, the highest-ranking Vatican official to comment on the referendum, Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, called the Irish vote not only a defeat for Christian principles, but a defeat for humanity. Pope Francis has not commented on the referendum directly, but he told his Wednesday audience in Rome in an off-the-cuff remark, "The alliance of love between a man and a woman, and alliance for life, cannot be improvised and is not made in a day." And Britain's first Conservative government in 2 decades took office on Wednesday as Queen Elizabeth unveiled the government's agenda at the state opening of Parliament. At the top of the Tory agenda, European Union reforms.
My government will renegotiate the United Kingdom's relationship with the European Union and pursue reform of the European Union for the benefit of all member states. Alongside this, early legislation will be introduced to provide for an in-out referendum on membership of the European Union before the end of 2017. Measures will be introduced to increase energy security.
Other major legislation announced by the Queen: immigration controls, trade union reform, and more autonomy to Scotland and Wales. The Queen's speech, always a blend of politics and theater, replete with gilded thrones, a diamond-studded crown, and officials in antiquated garb, followed the May 7th parliamentary election that unexpectedly gave Prime Minister David Cameron's Conservatives a majority. And a political sea change could soon be coming to Poland. Andrzej Duda, a 43-year-old lawyer and a member of the EU Parliament, won the country's presidential election. It was another unexpected win for social conservatives in Europe and a warning for the center-left government that has been in power since 2007. Just 2 months ago, Duda was mostly an unknown and considered a long shot. Now his Law and Justice party could be in position to win Poland's full parliamentary elections. Duda is a practicing Roman Catholic who opposes abortion, same-sex marriage, and in vitro fertilization. The day after his election victory, he made a pilgrimage to Yasna Gora, the monastery, to pray before Our Lady of Czestochowa. And President Barack Obama's executive action on immigration reform suffered a major setback this week. A 3-judge panel from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals refused to lift a temporary hold on the president's controversial plan. It would shield up to 5 million illegals from deportation. The administration maintains that the president acted according to his constitutional authority, and they remain confident that he will eventually prevail in court. The Fifth Circuit Court made it clear that they believe the president's plan is, quote, unlikely to succeed on its merits in the courts. 25 states and Texas filed the lawsuit against the president. Immigration activists consider the ruling a severe setback. And President Barack Obama made an unannounced visit to the Shrine of Our Lady of Charity in Miami on Thursday. A spokesman for the White House National Security Council said the president was paying his respects to the Cuban-American diaspora that worship at the shrine. Local observers saw it as an attempt by the president to quell criticism of his moves to normalize relations with the Cuban government. The Cuban exile community in South Florida has been split over the renewed relations. Pope Francis helped broker discussions between the U.S. and Cuba last year. Back in the United States, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum formally announced his 2016 bid for the White House on Wednesday. Speaking near his boyhood home in Butler, Pennsylvania, the Republican took a populist tone, vowing to fight for working-class Americans.
Working families don't need another president tied to big government or big money. And today is the day we are going to begin to fight back.
Santorum surprised many by winning the Iowa caucuses and 11 states in his 2012 bid for the White House. He joins a crowded field of more than a dozen high-profile Republicans, including former Governor George Pataki of New York, who also announced his candidacy for the GOP nomination on Thursday. And on the Democratic side, Senator Bernie Sanders threw his hat into the presidential ring this week. The longtime independent socialist will run as a Democrat against current frontrunner Hillary Clinton. And the Synod for the Family does not convene until October in Rome, but apparently a semi-secret preliminary gathering occurred at the Vatican this week. German Cardinal Reinhard Marx, along with members of the Swiss and French bishops' conferences, arranged the closed-door session to encourage, quote, pastoral innovations at the real synod in October. Key among the topics was how the church might welcome individuals who are in stable same-sex relationships. Reports have surfaced that no one was opposed to the church recognizing such unions. We'll have more on this in our next segment, plus a preview of my exclusive interview with Cardinal Walter Casper. Stay tuned for that. And clergy are warning parents about a new internet sensation called the Charlie Challenge. Using a homemade equivalent of a Ouija board, participants invoke a spirit, in this case calling out Charlie, Charlie, asking him if he wants to play. It has become a sensation among the young. Spanish exorcist Father Jose Fortea told EWTN News that the game involves the very real occult practice of calling on spirits, and that the Charlie being mentioned is a Mexican demon. They really should call him Carlito, Carlito. In any event, British tabloid The Daily Mirror picked up the urgent warning of Father Stephen McCarthy. He's a high school chaplain in Philadelphia, and he warned his pupils that, quote, there is no such thing as innocently playing with demons, end quote. And for all of you Flannery O'Connor fans, and you should all be, mark your calendars. On June 5th, the United States Postal Service will be honoring the much-beloved American Catholic author with a new stamp. Her startling Southern grotesque fiction touched generations. The color portrait on the stamp is a watercolor. It's based on O'Connor's photograph taken when she was a student at the Georgia State College for Women in the 1940s. She's flanked by those peacock feathers, which she raised at her home in Georgia. O'Connor died from lupus-related causes in 1964. She was just 39. I guess, at least where authors are concerned, the violent do bear it away via priority mail. In case you missed it, I recently interviewed O'Connor's biographer and friend, William Sessions, on the occasion of the release of her personal prayer journal. I've reposted a link to that interview on my Facebook and Twitter pages. Be sure to check that out. Finally, a few weeks ago, we aired a climate change debate on the heels of a Vatican UN conference on the topic. We featured representatives from both sides of the issue, debating the science and the implications of a papal encyclical on the environment. Well, this week, a political group has started a petition to try to silence this show for daring to feature what it calls a notorious climate denial activist. Now, for anyone who cares to watch, we hosted a fair debate, boys and girls. We invited a climate change activist and a skeptic to make their respective cases, which they did, and we trusted that the audience would come to their own conclusions. Is this online pressure group and its supporters really saying that the science of climate change, the record, is somehow above debate, and that even to discuss these matters should be verboten? Sorry, but that doesn't wash here. Part of my job as a journalist is to ask questions. I question government officials, church officials, anyone in the public arena. That's our obligation. Free speech and open discussion are the very hallmarks of a democratic society. For a mob, by petition or otherwise, to attempt to stifle debate or forbid certain topics from conversation is a type of bullying that will never be tolerated on this program. If the conversation here offends you, I'll say what so many people hear when they complain to networks about all sorts of programs that offend them. Change the channel and get over it. All views will be entertained and challenged right here. Enjoy the program.